Welcome everyone to Geotab's Road Ready Mind and Body webinar. I'm Kirsty Birch, founder of Work It Well, where we specialise in workplace wellbeing, mental health and performance. Now, as we celebrate Road Safety Week, we're here to explore the impact of stress, anxiety and sleep deprivation towards driver behaviour and how prioritising mental health can lead to safer roads. Now, a quick word about Geotab. As a global leader in telematics and fleet management solutions, Geotab empowers businesses worldwide to manage their vehicles and assets more efficiently. Now, today, we're going to be here to talk about support of drivers' well-being, and we're excited to unveil some powerful insights from their latest driver survey. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for providing some really insightful questions. And I'd like to introduce our fantastic lineup of speakers who will share their insights with us today. So Edward Kolberger from Senior Vice President at Geotab, Peter Milchard representing the Association of Fleet Professionals, as you may know as AFP, Lucy Straker from Break, the road safety charity, and Paul Atkinson, ex-police officer and driver. Each of our panellists will now briefly introduce themselves and share a little bit what brings them to this important discussion. So let's start with these introductions. Ed, could you briefly introduce yourself and share what brings you to this important discussion today?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Kirsty, and thank you very much to the panelists for joining today. And I'd like to thank everybody else for joining us as well. I think this is a really important topic that really hasn't been discussed as much as it really should. So my name is Edward Kolberger. I'm the Senior Vice President for Geotab across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. For those unfamiliar with Geotab, we're the largest connected vehicle company in the world, connecting over 4.5 million vehicles. We provide businesses with tools, insights, and data that they need to manage their fleets effectively, productively, and we aim to really improve driver safety and sustainability on our roads today. We believe that driver well-being is absolutely critical to road safety. That's why we're investing heavily in the research and development on this side to understand and address challenges faced by our commercial drivers that are out on the road every day. So first of all, we're delighted to facilitate this webinar for Road Safety Week, focusing on the vital connection between driver mental health and road safety. There's absolutely a connection here. We'll be exploring the impact of stress, anxiety, and fatigue on driver behavior, and really discussing how organizations can better support their drivers. And then to help inform this discussion, we conducted a survey of commercial vehicle drivers across the UK, and we'll be providing insights from this survey that we think will add a lot of valuable information to the group, to the broader group and ecosystem, and we're really keen to share some of these key findings. So thank you very much once again, Kirsty, and to the panel.
Thanks, Ed. Over to you, Peter. We'd like to know a little bit about you and why you've joined us for this conversation today.
Okay, well, first and foremost, thank you very much for the invite, and very eager to be involved here. Representing today Association of Fleet Professionals, as Kirsty did mention at the beginning, probably more commonly known as the AFP. It's a not-for-profit organisation focusing on membership of fleet managers across the UK, and to try and really raise the profile of fleet management within most businesses. A lot of my day job is actually focusing on incident prevention measures with clients, and where we identify that not necessarily a need has been identified in the business for effective fleet management. So the AFP does really try to work to improve skill sets for individuals that may not know that they have a role within their business to focus very much on the vehicle, and sort of leading in from, obviously, for the connection with Break Road Safety Week as well. Not about going through the stats today, but there's a lot of serious incidents and lots of unfortunate fatalities on the road. So I'm sort of welcoming the views and the discussions in terms of what I perceive is some of the issues, and we'll come through that in terms of people's mental health, well-being, etc. So fantastic to be part of this today.
Thanks, Peter. That's really appreciated. Lucy, over to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and what's motivated you to participate in today's discussion?
Well, again, thank you for inviting us on and for hosting this webinar during Road Safety Week. I'm a campaigns manager at Break, the road safety charity. We are the hosts of Road Safety Week, which happens every single year. Break next year will be entering into its 30th year of existence. We are a charity who has three main things that we do. One is campaigning, which is obviously all my remit. That's campaigning for safer roads and to reduce those casualty statistics down to zero, making sure that everybody has safe and green journeys. We also do a lot of education work, so we work with organisations, we work with schools to try and educate people as much as possible about the road and about danger on the road and how we can be safer. And then finally, and probably most importantly, we run the National Road Victim Service, which is there. It's a free service there to support anyone who is bereaved or seriously injured following a road crash. And we operate right across the UK. And, we help thousands of families every single year in order to just get through the kind of the stages after a crash and getting themselves back up and into society, whether that's kind of helping them through the kind of inquests or the court situations, whatever it may be. Sometimes it's just sitting down and listening to people whilst they talk about their loved ones, whatever it may be. We're there as a kind of a helping hand to support, whether it's practical or emotional support. And obviously that is something that is really, really important and has a really lasting effect on people, because sudden death is such an awful thing to have to deal with. So we just need to make sure that everybody is cared for and straight after a crash and for the forthcoming years after that as well. So thank you very much for inviting us on. Always happy to talk about how we can make the roads safer. That's what we're here for.
Thank you, Lucy. That's really insightful. So handing over last but not least to our driver of the room, Paul, we'd love to hear from you too. Please introduce yourself and let us know what brings you to the table today.
Yeah, good morning. My name's Paul Atkinson. I'm a retired police officer. I did 30 years in the police. And since retiring 9 years ago, I've been an LGV driver for my sins. I also used to do it while I was in the police force as well. I've always been passionate about road safety, in particular the fatal four. And I've had a career dedicated to prevention, and following on from Lucy, what a fabulous job they do. I've had experience of family liaison officers and what a difficult task that is. There's lots and lots of work that's still got to be done with that moving forward. But the reason for me being here today is not to bang on about enforcement and education that's required on the roads, but to give a driver insight and how employees can help drivers have a better work-life balance. I'm a great believer in we work to live. We don't live to work.
Thanks for all those insightful introductions. And Paul, you're right. I think having that different perspective is really going to just help everybody in the room as well as the listeners. So let's dive into the heart of today's topic. And there are some recent survey results from Geotab. And I'm going to, before we hand over to Ed, who's going to obviously let us know all of that about those, I just want to find out from you, Ed, tell us why Geotab has conducted this survey in the first place. What's the key aim here?
Yeah, well, first of all, what an amazing panel. Like hearing the introductions from Lucy, Peter, and Paul, who really provide some diverse background and I guess even motivation in terms of why we need to do this, really rounds out kind of the ecosystem to a large degree. This survey was conducted in October of this year, so it's really, really fresh. And it had 500 professional UK lorry and van drivers. What's interesting is beyond that, 392 were male drivers and 108 female drivers. I thought that was quite interesting. So over 25% female drivers. So, it's a diverse topic that really doesn't have any bias, mental health. At Geotab, we're incredibly passionate about road safety, sustainability, but really road safety is super critical. We believe our technology helps road safety and actually saves lives. So that's obviously critically important. In recent years, during and since COVID, we've noticed a growing concern around driver stress and mental health and mental well-being and the potential impact on driver behavior. We've all been behind the road driving, and there's always stressors out there, but imagine driving for a living, driving every day. as Paul was mentioning, and that compounds the issue. So we feel we have a bit of an inherent need to help the UK's commercial driving community. I think it's really important, and then that will help the broader community. So we wanted to gain deeper understanding of the challenges faced by commercial drivers on a daily basis. Why are they experiencing high levels of stress? Do they feel supported by their employers? Do they feel supported by the community? What are their concerns regarding safety? And by getting answers to these questions, we hope to identify areas where, as an industry, we can do better supporting our drivers. And ultimately, we want to drive positive change. Our aim is to use the data to drive change in our environment with our commercial fleet operators, and ultimately with our drivers as well. We want to equip these managers, industry leaders, policymakers, public and private, with the insights they need to create a safer and healthier environment for our commercial drivers. This is a really important step and a core tenet at Geotab. And we know that our technology saves lives. We did a study of over 200,000 vehicles driving 6.2 billion kilometers, and the companies that incorporated Geotab safety solutions had a 21% less collisions than non-users. So that's a profound impact. Over 3,500 collisions were reduced right there across all levels of severity. So incorporating and using technology, we think, is incredibly important. And obviously, the human impact there is exponential. Behind every driver trip, every road trip, is a driver's safety and well-being, and it impacts all of us. So incredibly important. As a data company, we like to throw out stats, and in 2023, once again, organizations that leveraged our technology saw a 40% reduction in collision rates, lowering cost, and enhancing fleet safety for these commercial organizations. So, I think it's a profound discussion, and it's something that we're just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of how technology can help our roads and communities today, and ultimately drivers.
I think you're spot on there, Ed, 100%. Can you share some of these key findings with us? What are the stats telling us about the current state of driver well-being and safety?
Yeah, so it is a pretty concerning picture, to be honest. So the stats showed a staggering 90% of drivers we surveyed reported that work-related stress negatively impacts their driving. So this highlights the urgent need to address mental health within the commercial driving sector. Furthermore, half the drivers admitted to considering quitting their jobs because of stress. So this points to a serious issue with driver retention and the overall well-being of our essential workforce. Another finding was the increased accident risk. So 97%, so almost 100% of drivers believe that the risk of accidents has increased over the last 5 years. So this perception is supported by our own data, which shows a significant decrease in the average distance driven per collision. So I'll repeat that. The average distance per collision is decreasing, which obviously makes our roads less safe. And in one of our studies, we found that the total distance per collision driven by truck, van, or taxi operator in the UK decreased by 19% in 2023 from 920,000 miles per collision to 740,000 miles per collision. We'll be running this analysis and study again in 2025 to review if we're improving on this side. Couple other quick points. So worrying is half of the drivers surveyed felt uncomfortable approaching their employer for support with stress and other mental health concerns. And then on a positive side, half of the drivers expressed support for new technology. So we think that, we play a pivotal role here, the community wider, but embracing technology from Geotab and from our competitors, we think will help the overall road safety and our environment.
Excuse me.
Sorry, Ed. So what I noticed that, but previously when we spoke, it's one of these stats around this where drivers are saying they get little or no mental health support from their employers, or they feel like they don't. There is obviously a clear gap. Now, in my industry, I talk to lots of different organisations in different industries, and this is felt across every industry. This is not just fleet,
Yeah.
unique to fleet. That's what I'm trying to say. It's, there's plenty of people out there that feel uncomfortable using workplace mental health resources because they feel like there's a bit of a stigma there as well. But there's also showing a big need now that we need to have that better support across the board. And I think it has to be industry designed as well. One size doesn't fit every single industry, so I think we need to recognise that. But yeah, that's quite staggering. So I'm not surprised to hear some of those stats because I see this a lot. But just bear in mind, this isn't just related to fleet. I think we're all human, and I think this is felt across the board. So just over to Peter, what's your initial reactions to these results? I mean, are there these issues that you've seen before with other fleet professionals? Is it what do you say? Are some of your members doing things to address these safety and wellbeing concerns?
Yeah, well, one, excuse me, one is quite sort of worrying stats first and foremost, that we're looking at. But I've probably spent just under 30 years within the sort of road safety arena in terms of trying to improve clients. Formerly a transport manager as well, and I still think we do have the situation where some companies do have very good wellbeing programs that's in place. The bigger issue that I probably find, particularly in the commercial sector, and it'd be interesting to see Paul's viewpoint on this one, is that there seems to be not a frightener, but there's a I don't want to show weakness, and I think it's a cultural issue within industry sectors that I'm not to show my feelings and not to show my emotions. And the important thing that I see with some of my work is unless you understand that the stats are showing the bad situations that we find ourselves in, and the vast majority of those incidents are caused by human behaviour, and we know that, yeah. But for many, many, many years, people have been doing what I would deem as the basic levels of risk management within a business, such as the license checking, the driver handbooks, the standardized issues that probably most business you go into probably have got that. But a driver license check doesn't actually tell you how the driver is feeling. And then the pressure points under the driver to conduct a journey when there's pressures, and we probably are aware that there's shortages in the industries at times, and drivers are in quite heavy demand, and the pressures on the business to make deliveries, as an example. So a lot of that is there. It could also be potential some intimidation in terms of, I'm frightened to speak to my transport manager, because the transport manager is not perceived to show that they're interested in my well-being. They're just interested in the vehicle going from A to B. So yeah, it is worrying. The positive that I find is, and there's no stats to approach this, but it tends to be at industry sectors where we're sort of looking at more mature drivers from an age point of view and experience. We're now starting to introduce younger drivers in those industry sectors, and they're much more open to talking about well-being and how they're feeling and their mental health. So maybe it's that education and it's that cultural shift that we need to reach the majority of those drivers that don't really feel that it's perceived or nobody's interested. And just for me to finalise as well there, every one of us have got daily issues in our lives. Sometimes we take those issues to work, but sometimes when we're driving a large vehicle in a very large and dangerous environment, taking those problems to work might not be a very good mixture. So it's about trying to work and give people the opportunities to deal with those situations. And where the pressure points of people is so high in terms of workload, actually the more relaxing time for those individuals is probably the driving activity. And that's maybe their mind may be looking at their issues that they have on their mind. And maybe we talk about distracted driving quite a lot, and most people's viewpoint of distracted driving is the likes of mobile phone use, etc. But driver distraction can actually be what's going on in your mind, and that can distract you away. So surprising but unsurprising in a funny sort of way. But it's great that we got the industry sector to actually be transparent and want to share that information, and we can't ignore that information and those results, and we need to do something about that.
I think you're spot on there, Peter. I think the fact that we've got awareness around this now and gives us the opportunity to make these positive changes now. So, Paul, over to you, because I know that, like Peter just said, this is going to be great to come from you now. As someone with first-hand experience, do these survey findings resonate with what you've seen? What's the current feedback from the drivers you've spoken with? Because I know you've been speaking to people that are currently working in the industry and also retired drivers.
Basically, yeah, exactly what Peter said. Driving, you don't like to let anybody down. And if you've been given a workload, it's almost like a little mini challenge, isn't it? That you want to get your work done. But it's a bit of a vicious circle, really, because there's the old adage in the industry, if the wheels are not turning, then nobody's earning. So to earn the money, and it all comes down to earning money for companies, doesn't it, basically? Planning's a massive thing in the getting your day's work and getting your schedule of what you've got to do. But sometimes the planning's not done very well. This is what I got, the feedback I got back from some of my colleagues. What they were saying, the biggest thing is the just being planned all wrong. And someone used an analogy. It's like a Premier League football game. Geography, etc., etc. And one of the big things that was on the drivers' minds was fixed scheduling. Realistic chance of completing a day in an allotted time. They find that they were getting lots of add-ons, unrealistic, delivery times, etc., not taking into account of diversions, congestions, etc., etc. And going back to what Peter said about the, completing your day's work, you don't want to let anyone down, not so much yourself, the company, the customer, etc. If you have any hold-ups or comebacks, then you start to rush. And if you start to rush and you've got these time constraints on you, that rushing around, that builds up its own stress. And if traffic gets worse, the stress gets worse. And with the stress comes the anxiety and all those worries about, etc. Am I going to get done? Am I going to miss my time slot? Am I going to have to wait? And this builds up a great big picture. And that's when you've got a higher chance of your collisions, etc. So it's basically the rushing around and the tight time constraints, which are the biggest thing in the driver's issue, I think. I mean, like nowadays they've got some beautiful kit. You drive some fantastic trucks and you've got, all the tech and that's going on with it. But it basically comes down to the biggest stress factor and what makes people think I just can't be doing with this anymore is the time constraints. And most of them have suggested that if they had fixed scheduling, they were given a day's work, there were no checks being written that can't be cashed in the middle of the day, and a little bit of self-management. And obviously, take into consideration of that, you've also got your constraints of your legislation as well, tachograph, working time directive, etc., etc. I know you can't get around that, and they are there to protect everybody. But that's what it came down to. The pressures have all come down to unrealistic targeting. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that does. But and you are so right. I think the thing is, in order to perform at your best, you do have to feel at your best, though, and I'm a big believer in that. Yeah. So it's one of those things. I know as much as everybody wants to do certain things to obviously be as productive as they possibly can and to make money for the organisation, but for every pound invested into mental health and well-being for any organisation, there's potential ROIs of £5. So it is worthwhile for organisations to do this. So just reiterating that, I think sometimes you want your drivers to be feeling at their best. That way they're a lot more productive. And likewise, I think they'll be the biggest ambassadors for your organisation because they're being looked after. And that's where you can retain your staff a lot easier. So Lucy, over to you. I didn't want to leave you out over there. Tell us about why post-crash support is so important and how employers can support employees who have been impacted by a road crash, whether that's as a driver or as a family member or victims.
Well, post-crash support is so important for a number of reasons. I mean, one it's such a traumatic road crashes, and road death is sudden, it's traumatic, and it can send shockwaves right across communities, families, workplaces, and all those kind of things, which is why it's so important to make sure that everybody gets the right level of support and a high standard of support after that crash, just to get them back up into society. You know, that grief is such a hard thing to deal with. If you've got suffering from a life-changing injury, you know, your world has changed suddenly, you know, and it is sudden. It's so sudden, and that's why it's so important. But then also kind of like that post-crash investigation is so important, because, you know, if anything, aside from the roads, if something happened that caused death or serious injury in your workplace or at home or wherever you are, you would do whatever you could do to make sure that wouldn't happen again. That you would do that. You'd have a full investigation to make sure that didn't happen again. Whereas on the road, sometimes we kind of almost accept that it's inevitably going to happen, but it doesn't have to inevitably happen. You know, there are ways that we can prevent these crashes happening, and one of the main ways we can do that is to learn from crashes that have happened and to listen to those people who were involved in that, who've been bereaved by that, who can really kind of add that lived experience back into it. So that's why it's so important to really kind of look at crashes and look at how they've impacted on people's lives. You know, we've been talking to people who were involved in a crash. We spoke to one person. She was involved in a crash. She was pregnant. She lost a child, and she came back to work, and straight away she was put straight back into driving again. And there was no kind of like build up to that. There was no support around her for that. She was just thrown straight back into driving again through her employer. And it was like that put her at a high level of anxiety, a high level of stress, you know, and she, like you say, you're not going to be working at your best in doing that. So it's important to understand the emotional impact of a crash on a person, whether they witnessed that crash, whether they were part of that crash, or whether somebody in their life has died as a result of a crash. Their perspective on the road changes dramatically as soon as people have been impacted by a crash. And that's why we really encourage employers to think about that and provide that emotional support. You know, any kind of like normal occupational health, kind of build people back into doing things. Don't just throw them back into the deep end and expect them to be exactly the same. These things have a lasting impact. We have people fundraising and in our system that we support for years after crashes. You know, this is not something that goes away after a week. This is I know one bereaved family who always say that grief walks alongside them every single day and has done for 10, 15 years. You know, this kind of becomes a fundamental part of their life, and it's important for employers to understand that and to give it kind of the validation that it needs, basically.
Yeah, echoing that support is really needed. So Peter, over to you. From what Lucy's just said then, do you think companies could be doing more to support their drivers? What are some of the best practices that you've seen out there in the field at the minute?
Yes, this is basically the short answer. People could be doing more, and they're not doing more. And probably coming back from Lucy's perspective, no one wants to have an incident that occurs, but actually the opportunity to learn is missing, and a lot of times because so many people just accept that incidents are inevitable to some respects in a business. I'm talking more sort of lower speed collisions where somebody may well have hit a post or something like that. And actually, if we don't set right from the beginning the focus that it's an important level, as Lucy said, certain areas, if you used to do something in an office that was against the normal rules, there'd be some form of investigation. There's possibly a disciplinary, there's possibly action, there's possibly retraining. But what would happen if somebody in a car park sort of hit a post, as I sort of mentioned? the very small minority of operators that are out there that will actually go to the level of talking to the driver afterwards to do what we deem as a post-incident report or discussion. And that doesn't need to be, when everyone sort of talks about interviews and processes, it's not so much about having to spend lots of time and effort, but actually just talking with the driver and to identify what the issues are. And then implementing certain specific things that, if the driver's saying, well, I just didn't see it, I didn't notify that, at least it gives you an opportunity to focus on, well, why did it happen? And if the driver didn't see, introduce sort of very basic initiatives like, actually, have you had your eyesight checked? Because actually, if we use that opportunity or we miss that opportunity to have that conversation and make awareness to that driver that they may well need to look at having their eyesight checked and actually have their eyesight checked and there's a failing, and actually the solution actually is a new set of glasses as an example, or even the first set of glasses. If we don't do that, and that individual's had that instant, and culturally within the business that's accepted, because it's like sometimes it becomes a little bit of humour that somebody, he's hit a post in a car park or she's hit a post in a car park. But actually, if we don't take action at that point, at the next stage, if that eyesight is the identification issue that's caused that incident, but we haven't picked up on it, the next time that individual does the same thing, because we haven't done any action or any help for the driver to mitigate that happening, that situation could be significantly higher. And I'll leave you to imagine what could be in front or in between the vehicle and the post. And sometimes it's cultures in businesses as well that sometimes need to change. I did deal with an operator many years ago that had very long vehicles, and Paul mentioned earlier about the technology in vehicles has got much improved, and sometimes there may well be an over-reliance on the technology sometimes. But when that technology wasn't available, one operator that we knew said their reversing policy is to go at very slow speed, and this is part of their training, to go very low speed, and when they touch the wall, they know that they're actually in the right location. Now, time and time again, we see that those sort of situations do happen. And culturally, it's accepting. If we got a 2-person team that's on a delivery schedule and there's a reversing into situations, I put the challenge out to people to see how many times that individual that's the second person on that delivery run is actually out of the vehicle guiding that vehicle back, even though it's probably an expectation and training is given. And particularly if it's a dark, cold, wet day, it's just trying to, I think people believe that it's never going to happen to them. And Lucy's probably got very many examples that she can probably share with people, and Paul as well, really, that people that thought it would never, ever happen to them, and it does. So.
No, I think you're right, Pete. I think the conversations allow us to put a lot more preventive measures in place. And I say this amongst so many things. I think you learn from everything, don't you? If you can use that as a movement moving forward, so it's a positive now. That's never a bad thing, is it? So, Paul, as a driver, because I know Peter's put you in the hot seat again now, as a driver, what would you like to see more from employers? I mean, how can they better support the mental health of the drivers out there?
Monitoring it, basically. Look at hours, look at deliveries, look at where they're going. Again, it comes down to the planners. A planner should be wouldn't it be nice? Normally, someone that does the planning, if you say for some of the bigger haulage organisations, a planner is someone that's just perhaps starting out in the haulage business. It's the job that no one else wants to do. And really, it should be a senior person that understands the rules. I was one of the drivers I was speaking to. He was leaving the Midlands, and he had a delivery in London, in central London. And he couldn't work out how he could get into London, get delivered and get out using the hours available to him. Fortunately, he had a senior planner, and how they planned it, he would drive down to the London Gateway, stop before he went into London, work his hours so that he had his break and give himself reset himself for his 4.5 hours, and then go into London and do the job like that. So good planning can reduce it, because believe me, driving a truck in central London is a really, really fun thing to do. Not. It's like being attacked by bees. But yeah, and there's those things, and there's all sorts of. And go back to what Peter said. He just made me chuckle so much talking about banksmen. It's exactly right. You see signs when you go into depots. No reversing unless without a banksman. And then sort of someone will just wander out of a warehouse and go, "Oh, just get on with it, mate. Don't worry about it." And there's bent posts and everything everywhere. There are things back, like you say, going backwards. If you're going backwards onto bays, there's bars on roads now that you do go back until your trailer tyres touch the bars to stop you. Even in trucks now, you have anti-collision warnings. Sometimes if you're driving along and someone's going to turn left in front of you, the truck will sense that someone's stopping in front of you. Everything comes to rushing about, and that's what it is. And but what do? You can't say to a driver, right, you've got 3 deliveries today. Take your time, get back when you're ready. It don't work like that.
I hear you there. I hear you. So this one is for you, sir. In terms of fostering positive driver behaviour now, because we've heard a lot about tech and we've heard about safer practices, how can companies encourage safer practices? Are there particular technologies or approaches that Geotab does recommend?
Yeah. So first of all, really interesting conversation. I want to pick up on a couple points. But number one, a holistic approach is really important. And at Geotab, we believe fostering positive driver behavior and interaction requires this holistic approach, combining technology, education, as well as a supportive workplace culture. So a couple examples. So one that Peter was mentioning. So our technology looks at when a vehicle arrives at a delivery point, and this is a last mile type vehicle doing a delivery, and we look at when they are reversing. So they should always do any reversing activity when they arrive at their delivery point. And we understand when a vehicle is put into park, when their seatbelt is taken off, when the ignition is done, and that sequence of events plus reversing is really important, because some catastrophic incidences can happen if you reverse when you leave. So you go in and do your delivery, and something or somebody could climb behind a vehicle, and obviously that could result in catastrophic incidences. So that's when you need to educate a driver on when you should be doing your reversing, and technology can help on that side. Another example is one of the largest commuting companies, bus companies in the world, leverages our technology to understand where the bus is, and driver and passenger safety are paramount to this organization. And they understand where the bus is in relation to its route. And if it's behind the route, some might think, oh, well, you have to speed up and get to your destination. But actually, they let the driver know by visual and audio alerts that, hey, don't worry, slow down, take your time, and, we'll take care of the rest. And then in the background, the technology sends alerts to the bus route that, hey, the bus is running behind, so that the passengers understand that. And we think that that's really important. So technology and telematics and now advanced AI models are going to play a crucial role in promoting safer roads and safer vehicles and ultimately safer drivers. Our tech can also monitor things like speed and acceleration and lateral movement, right? And I think that that's important, but we also feel that providing a driver score based off of this kind of activity is quite arbitrary, because it does not look at many variables that are present when a driver is driving. The road, the vehicle conditions, the road conditions. Other vehicles on the road has an obstacle come in their way, and they've had to swerve out of the way, which is actually probably safe, but they might get demerited because the tech might think it's a bad instance. So the text doesn't have all the context. And we think that understanding a vehicle's propensity to have an accident and providing an indicator or likelihood that this vehicle will have a crash over the next 100,000 miles, if they're driving in really difficult conditions, really difficult roads where there are lots of accidents, because we understand where accidents happen, minor and major, you can then start predicting when a vehicle will have the likelihood of an accident, more so than another vehicle driving in the Midlands versus London, for example. So you enable different type of training and education alternatives. And again, I mentioned earlier, I think we're just touching the proverbial tip of the iceberg here. As AI-powered solutions and AI agents will even help coach drivers as they understand, the context and things that are around a vehicle in real time. So we believe that is, kind of the holy grail of where we're getting to, and we have lots of gates between now and then. A supportive workplace culture, as I was mentioning, creating a supportive workplace culture is incredibly important. It means fostering open communication with our drivers, providing access to mental health resources, and promoting a healthy work-life balance. When drivers feel valued and supported, like all of us, they're more likely to prioritize safe driving and perform better. And then education and training is paramount to this. So beyond the tech, investing in comprehensive driver training programs is essential. The programs shouldn't just focus on the technical aspects of driving, but also on stress management, fatigue awareness, and mental well-being. So Geotab, we recommend that, all of our organizations that we work with and the broader environment should really invest in these areas because it will have a return on this investment. We obviously offer a wide range of solution from driver coaching tools, training resources, as well as integration with third-party well-being apps. So again, we encourage companies to embrace a data-driven approach to safety using insights to inform strategies and support drivers effectively with incentives to encourage safe practices.
That's really good to hear, Ed. Thank you very much. And lastly, over to you, Lucy, now. So Ed just mentioned a lot of things there that employers and what he recommends employers should be doing now. We're doing this webinar during Road Safety Week. What do you see as the top priorities for employers and drivers going forward now?
Well, I mean, for us, the top priority should always be safety, and how, promoting safety as something that is a benefit to everybody is something that we would strongly hold dear. I think quite often as a society we kind of look down upon safety. People think that it's socially acceptable to break the speed limit and to do that kind of like Peter was mentioning about that kind of culture of like if you hit a post then people kind of like almost you've hit that post, and like that there's this culture around driving which is actually, it's not conducive in order to making the road safer. We need to kind of really, everybody getting behind safety as an important, and making sure that we're not trying to, chase the speed limit or pushing people into having to drive situations when they're obviously fatigued or when they are, like full of stress, or that it's just not feasible for them to be able to do that. So making sure safety is the priority is something that we would wholeheartedly push forward for everybody. But then also, like, as I mentioned before, having that compassionate understanding of what happens in all ranges of crashes, even near misses as well, can have a profound effect on a driver, and like validating that, making sure that that's not something that's mocked or that's something that's kind of put away or just not even thought of. Think about your processes around that, making sure that, you put in that learning environment. So if there is a near miss situation, we're not vilifying people for it. We're understanding why it happened, making sure that didn't happen again, creating a culture where people can talk about these things and they're not trying to cover it up because for whatever reason it may be. So that's what we would really encourage people to do. Talk about safety openly, be positive. It comes from top down. If you're talking about safety and really pushing forward with safety as a primary element of your organisation, then that's only going to bode well. I mean, the roads minister spoke recently around road safety not being a priority. It should be a duty for everybody. We have a duty of care right across society. When, you know, as an employer, you have a duty of care, making sure that everybody is safe and everybody around you is safe as well. So that's what we would really encourage people to do. Really have a look at your relationship with safety. You know, how do you prioritize it? How do you make sure that it's talked about openly? You know, how do you learn from situations that do occur, and how do you treat people? How do you talk to people when a situation does happen? And just having that kind of that shift in culture could just have a real impact, we think.
Yeah, so important. You're absolutely spot on there. Having that humanised approach, because it does, that top down effect has a big. If you get it right, it can have a real positive ripple effect there. So you're spot on. Now, before we wrap up, I just want to bring attention to a couple of, I say, thoughtful questions that were sent in by some attendees today. And it's, to be fair, Paul, I think these are probably going to be perfect for you to answer. So it gives everybody else a little bit of an opportunity just to sit back and have a little bit of a listen. But one of the questions that came in was, drivers feel like they're treated the same, basically. So, for example, if one driver can complete a task in a certain time frame, we tend to assume that others can do the same, whether that's in workplaces, building sites, offices, restaurants. You know, people do work at different levels. So the question has come in is, why do all drivers feel like they're being treated the same, and why isn't this consideration applied to, I suppose, the driving industry, rather than like we just spoke earlier? If we're in an office, everybody works differently. Why is this not applied to this industry?
Different standards, isn't it? Different routes, different areas, different size trucks, different deliveries. For example, you're driving an articulated vehicle, you're up and down the country, you leave home on a Monday morning, you don't get home till Friday dinner time, or unless you've been delayed, you're not getting home till Saturday dinner time. You work for a builder's merchant, you're doing different deliveries every single day. You're perhaps not rushing to go, and you go home every night at the I don't really understand that, you know, why they don't think they're being treated the same, because all different jobs have all different angles. They have different, you know, the tramper, as you call him, as he sleeps in his truck all week, he's away, and he'll earn far much more money than what the build-based driver will earn, but working 8 till 4. It's such an up and down industry. Is a vicious circle, because it's all about the more money you earn, and the more you can do, the more you earn, and everybody's rushing around. But there are people that are quicker than others. There's some that want to go home. There's some that don't want to go home, and you know, there's just such a broad spectrum of individuals in the whole industry, and that's a really, really difficult question to answer. I don't really know the answer.
I mean,
if the truth be told. You know, and then we alluded to reversing into the post. It's great. It's like, did you know, to encourage people into the industry now, they've changed the licensing criteria. If you was to do your, I call it HGV, LGV, C&E, HGV Class 1, they've now removed, bear in mind that's a unit with a trailer, and you have to do a test on that. You don't have to do a reversing exercise anymore. So imagine you're turning up at a major supermarket distribution centre, and it's like being on show. There'll be about 25 truck drivers sitting in their wagons waiting to go on a bay, and it's your turn to go on a bay, and you're not very good at reversing. Now there's real stress. That's when real stress comes into it, and that's when things get bent and dumped into, and lorries get reversed into, etc., etc. It is a very, very stressful environment, but someone who's been driving 30 years, he'll come in, spin it on a sixpence, you know, reverse it in first go, whereas someone like me normally comes in, puts it on bay 4.5 after about 17 goes, and needs a new set of front tyres. But again, it's just different levels, different experience of them, and there's just so many vehicles on the road, and you know, and it is really difficult. And the distractions thing, we've all seen the social media videos, haven't we? People on their phones and people nodding off and being tired, and I think it's a massive education program and a massive communication program. And like you said, you just got and education. It's got to be education and remove that stress factor. but no, that's a really difficult question to answer.
No, I think you answered the second question a little bit in there as well. Probably, Peter, you might be good to answer this one as well. Drivers are coming in and they're asking, how do we combat the driver fatigue? Now, I know Paul mentioned a few things earlier that it is a big stress on there because it's a lot of pressure around that. And you don't know when you're getting home, etc. But what's your thoughts on this one? How can you help combat that?
I think really it comes down to lifestyle, to be honest with you, particularly if we're looking at from a LGV driver, like a large vehicle driver. As Paul alluded to, there are specific regulations there to make sure that you don't drive excessive hours. And this is probably coming back to where we started on in terms of mindfulness and what's going on with individuals, that actually you're limited to a certain number of hours of driving per week. I won't go into the details there. And yet we have still a significant issue with fatigue, and particularly on long distance journeys, which possibly could be related in many respects to sort of boredom, not the most exciting route, time of the day, lots of things that do come into that. But I definitely see that it's about trying to get drivers to do the right thing. And I think it's rest periods. I've had examples in my sort of industry or in my career where you have a driver that's allocated specific hours to do that. And actually, when there's been an incident that occurs, and this comes back to the importance of incident investigation, it transpires that because of the odd social hours that journey took, that once the journey's finished, the driver themselves can't automatically think, right, this is time for bed now, I'm going to bed. And you tend to find a lot of them do other activities, TV, films, etc., etc. So actually, I think as a professional industry, it's to an individual to manage their fatigue, but obviously help with their employers, and coming back to scheduling and correct planning and lots of things, and taking into account what people do. Do we understand our drivers? Do we understand that one of our drivers rushes to get back on a specific day because they've got a specific sport that they watch, or different things like that, and then they go to watch the sporting event? They don't get enough sleep, and then there's fatigue that comes into it. That's a very broad brush approach, really, from that point. But it's down to managing the fatigue, and it's everybody's responsibility. But people sometimes need help to manage that fatigue, and they may well feel the solution to that is drinking energy drinks. If you look at, and Paul will probably allude to this as well, tragic situations involving larger commercial vehicles, sometimes there's so many cans of energy drinks in those vehicles and I've had situations where the likes of Geotab systems as well pick up and identify where people do fall asleep at the wheel. That can't happen. It shouldn't happen. So we need to address why that is happening, and maybe it's looking at activity and changing the way that we do the work, maybe.
No, you're spot on, and that's exactly what Ed was talking about earlier. So now we're coming to the end of the webinar. I just want to make a point out there that for those of you tuning in today, we do understand that some of these topics can hit close to home. So if you or somebody else out there could use that extra support, then please consider reaching out to us and using some resources that are available. Mind are a mental health charity. They obviously offer mental health resources for employees and employers. You can check them out from mind.org.uk and you can get some more information there. But we do encourage anyone needing that support to reach out. No one should have to navigate these challenges alone. It's a tough gig as it is in life. I think we all need that support. So I'd like to turn it back over to Ed, who's going to give us a final word on behalf of Geotab. So no pressure, sir. All over to you.
Yeah, so no, thank you very much. Obviously, thank you, Kirsty, for moderating and hosting. Really, really great job. And to Peter, Paul, and Lucy, really, really fascinating and deep discussion, right? And I think, Peter, you just mentioned, right, like a lot of these are symptoms of a deeper cause, and we want to get to the bottom of this. So, I sit on the board of a national youth mental health charity. So this topic is near and dear to me. So we see the driver physical and mental well-being as a fundamentally important issue on a basic human level, and also considering the wider impact on road safety. The results of the survey clearly show that there's a lot of work to be done, but conversations like this and breaking down stigmas can help. I really believe that, and showcase what progressive fleet organizations are doing. So I think all of us here, and I know that Geotab is really on a mission to build this awareness in the countries in which we operate. UK is we have an office in London. We have a research and development facility in High Wycombe, and we hope that this webinar is the first of many. And please, contact myself or the organization. Follow us on social channels for more information. And obviously, a big thank you to everyone here for investing their most precious resource, which is time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed. And just echoing Ed's what he's just said there, thank you to all of the speakers today for sharing their insights, expertise and personal experiences. And to everyone watching, we hope this discussion has given you new perspectives on the importance of prioritising mental health and wellbeing whilst on the road. It's all about keeping these conversations going and making sure the roads are safer for us all. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of Road Safety Week.